Good evening, folks. This is Captain Mark from Kings Landing Sportfishing, and it is Torpedo Divers Thursday Night Live. And today I've got Captain Brandon White with me here from Rochester, New York, and we're going to give you guys a bit of an update around what's going on Lake Ontario, as we're both Lake Ontario captains. So maybe just quickly to jog your memory, I'll get Brandon to do a quick introduction of himself, and then I'll introduce myself, and we'll dive right in while we get some viewers. And just to remind everyone, please feel free, ask your questions, and Brandon and I will try to tackle them. So over to you, Brandon.
Yeah, Brandon White, Rochester Sportfishing Charters. I know you guys have all, probably know who we are by now, but if you don't, we Rochester Sportfishing. We run a 2-boat spread here. I run the smaller one, so I do both the Great Lakes, Lake Erie and Lake Ontario, as well as some of the Finger Lakes. So I'll touch on a couple points from my Lake Erie trip yesterday, and also how the Lake Ontario bite has been.
Awesome. And for those of you that don't me, Captain Mark Kulak, Kings Landing Sportfishing, based out of Toronto, Ontario. I am solely a Lake Ontario guy, so I'm happy to talk about what's been going on Lake Ontario. When Brandon jumped in, I think his first comment was, wow, did I ever have a tan? I've been on the water from June 29th until July 12th without a moment off, running doubles every day. So lots of time in the water the last, call it 2 weeks. And then purposefully, I've actually not been on the water the last couple of days. And I want to talk a little bit about that. So I'll talk about that a little bit later. So actually, maybe just let's start off with Brandon. Maybe you talk a little bit about what's been going on in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, we, it's funny that as we were talking beforehand, before we went live, about how you were saying it's been dead calm on your end, whereas for us, it's been cranking. We've had a lot of blow off days over here so far. And with that, the lake flipped as well, and one, I know you're going to touch on the way that the moon affects the bite. But as well, the way that the lake flipping affects the bite. And anybody that doesn't understand what flipping is, the simple concept is that, just swap them. The warm surface water goes to the bottom. The cold bottom water goes to the top. There could be a lot of mixing in there, and you need to get away from that mixing. And typically, you have one of two options to keep it simple. You either need to go in tight, where you should have cold water, or you need to go offshore, where you should have stable water. But the in tight is not always a go-to, because I have gone out there in the dead of summer where it's 80, 90 degrees out, and that water, I mean, it is ice cold, where you're almost, you can feel it in the air how cold, the moisture content.
You see steam coming off the water, or the fog, right? Because the water is that cold.
So yeah, the fish, you would, if the temperature's right, the fish will be in there. But if it is too cold, there will be zero fish in there. They will get away from that. They don't like mixing. So if you should have a fish hawk if you're fishing in Great Lakes. And if you are getting mixings of temps, you need to get lost. Get out of there.
It's funny you say that, Brandon. When you talk about flipping, I have a rule. Like, if the lake flips, I use the temperature maps to get a sense of what's going on, and I go deep. I don't even bother trying in close, because to your point, the chances of finding the fish are pretty much slim to none. When you leave the pierheads and you're seeing 42, 43, 44 degrees Fahrenheit, like, I just basically I point the boat south because I'm heading towards you. Yeah. And I literally just keep going until I can see temperatures at least in the low 50s. Like, and if that's 5 miles, great. If that's 10 miles, great. If that's 12 miles, great.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest mistakes people make too is they take into consideration that the lake flipped and that those cold temperatures are up high, but then they go back to their normal mentality. And I'm not to say that it wouldn't work, but they're shooting riggers down 100 to 120 feet, and it's like, wait a second, you went out here because the cold water is up top, and now you're going super deep. It's like, I'm not saying that the fish aren't down there, but you can't forget to fish high. And a perfect example, our biggest fish this week came on a dipsy diver out 80 feet on a 2 setting. So what it,
Yeah.
and that was over. I can't remember. It was over maybe 300-400 foot of water, but only out 80 feet. And I feel like there's nobody that would stop their counter on their reel at 80 feet on a diver. You know what I mean? Unless you're like telling yourself to ahead of time. It just seems so unnatural that you're just like, there's no way I can do this. And
I tell you, it's funny you say that, Brandon, because a couple of weeks, I guess about a month or so ago, when water was cold on our side, 77 diver on a number 3 setting was my hottest rod.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And,
Right?
I feel like there's so many people that won't do that, And I'm not saying, that you won't take fish down deep, but I'm just saying don't forget about your high rods. And, for the most part, those couple of days we were fishing the top 50 feet, and that was it. That's all we needed to fish.
Yeah. When I go, when the lake flips for me, I'm like you. I'm going into that 350, 400, 450 water. Typically for me, I'm running a 9 rod spread when I'm out that deep. I will put one rigger around 100, 110 feet. That's the deep rigger. I'll send one mag diver out, probably about 185 to 200, which I figure is around 85 feet of water down. And then everything else is usually 50, if not 40 and above. It's the 2 colors, 3 colors, 4 colors, 5 colors, the 50 weight of steel, the 100 weight of steel, the 150 weight of steel, the 200 weight of steel. Like they're, and then obviously a rigger down around 45 with a slider on it. Like that slider is only probably around 20 feet, 25 feet, and it takes tons of fish. So I'm with you. When the lake flips, I'm fishing that the top of the column, except for 2 rods.
Yeah, and just to prove a point, obviously any fish could be anywhere, but we've had steelhead rods out on the surface and taken Lakers on the surface. 3 feet down, high sun. If the water temperature is there, and especially when the lake flips and there's not the water that they want, or in the depth that they want, or there's not bait there, in that shallow water, just because it's cold doesn't mean they're going to be there. But in that stable water offshore, they can be there. So just remember that a Laker 3 feet down over 500.
Yeah. What else is being? So you talked about the lake flipping and it being a bit bumpy. I'm not surprised because I just think about I was out last on Tuesday night, and we'd had the southwest wind, which for us changed our water for the better. But then I was out trolling. The waves were coming from the southwest or the west, but it was blowing hard from the north. And I was having my autopilot was kicking out because it just didn't know what the hell to do with itself. It had waves coming from 2 directions and wind coming from another. I can imagine Tuesday night was just unfishable for you guys on the South Shore.
Oh yeah. We and when we see that coming, we'll check to see if there's a window in the morning. Usually, at least for us on the South Shore, we'll get like a 2 or 3 hour window, and we're honest with our customers and let them know that there is that potential that you might only get a handful of hours in, and we give them the option ahead of time. And you really never know. So I would tell people as well, if you're going out there, and this goes for any safety circumstance, if you're going out there and you know that it's going to get rough and you know what direction the wind's going to come out of, set yourself up and either drive or troll to the direction that you think the wind is going to come from, so that when it does start to pick up, you can safely roll back. And
flip around.
It's going to help your spread. I think if anybody doesn't have a drift sock, and on your boat, I'm sure you gotta have a monstrous one.
Yeah.
But
2 big ones and 2 small ones.
Exactly. And utilizing it. We've been doing that more recently than we've ever had to. Typically we can get away with 1. But it's been so, the currents and the wind have been so unhappy that we've had to run 2. And anybody that doesn't understand the purpose of a drift sock, obviously it's to slow yourself down, but it's not just to slow yourself down. If you don't have up speed, you don't have control of your boat, and if you don't have control of your boat, that's where you run into problems. So kind of getting to a point I didn't even plan on bringing up, but I'll bring it up. I don't have a demonstration to show you, but there'll be times where you need to get your boat speed up to have control of your boat. So 3, 5, 4 to get speed down. And those drift socks are the motor has the propulsion to control the boat, but the drift socks are keeping your speed under control. And some people are like, oh, well, won't that pull out line, on your any of your reels or this or this? And what we actually do on our dipsies is we'll take like a Canon clip or a Scotty clip, and we'll take the little metal piece, a downrigger clip. We'll take that little metal swivel there, and we'll actually like loop it on like the clicker button or just anything, and then we'll put the other the actual pinch pad. We'll put it on the wire line itself, just a little bit, just enough, and that'll keep your line from creeping out on you when you're going real fast up speed. And then if a fish hits it, it'll just it'll swing off, and then you just have to remove it. So there's a tip for anybody. I'm sorry I don't have a demonstration, but I also didn't plan on bringing that up. But it really does make a difference.
But yeah, and you make a good point about the drift bags. Like I've got the Amish Outfitters big massive bags, and there's times when the wind's coming from behind me. I've got both of them down, and it's to slow me down enough, but also allow me to get the kicker rubbing enough, so I've got boat control because the kicker can basically not be running in my down speeds, 2.1, 2.2. The problem is I've got no surface speed and I have no control.
Yep. And I was running into that problem yesterday on Lake Erie. I was walleye fishing and I could not, the current and the waves, I could not keep up speed. So even on my Lund, I chucked the bag out there so I could get my speed up to have control of the boat for my autopilot, and then work on, specifying it, to the speed that you're trying to accomplish on the down speed. And that's a time when if having a fish hawk on Lake Erie helps out, because a lot of guys don't run them, but I think it's great for speed because Kip and I have agreed, and I don't know about you, but we've seen way more current this year than we have in past years. And we've honestly, because of it, we've been running a more of a north-south troll than we ever have before, just for boat control and proper speed.
Yeah, so I agree with you on the current. Some form of speed and temp device is really important. I agree with you there. Where I fish in Toronto, if you troll north-south or south-north, whatever you want to call it, you'll probably get shot. It's everyone fishes east-west, like it'll be an absolute disaster. So you kind of got to go with the flow. The section I fish out of Toronto, it's called the Drop, and it's between call it Toronto and call it Scarborough, which is part of Toronto, and it's like a major highway in the summer. Like you'll see 300-400 boats just trolling along this line because it's the marina I'm in is actually Scarborough Bluffs or Bluffers Park Marina. It's a drop off of a cliff face. Well, as I tell people, you've got that cliff face that we can all see, and there's actually another one of those cliff faces in the water where it goes from 80 feet to 180 feet, like a snap of your fingers. So you can imagine you either troll the shallow side or the deep side, or you zigzag across. So it's pretty popular, and and it holds fish. So sometimes you hate to say it, like you've got about a half a mile where you're gonna get the most fish, and then when you get too far out on the deep end or too far in on the shallow end, you're not getting the same level of bites by any means.
Yeah, thankfully, obviously we don't have that structure. So, we typically, if we're doing that north-south, we're not in shallow, we're in that 300 to 500 range. So there's plenty of water out there, plenty of room for everybody to do their own thing.
Yeah, when I go deep, it's always a south troll and a north troll back, always. Yeah. So, it's interesting. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about what's been going on my side of the lake. So I've been out, like I said, for the last 2 weeks straight. And it started out a little bit slow as our water was a bit cool, and it felt like we were 2 or 3 weeks behind. And then pretty much around a week ago, like light switch flipped and it started to really get going good. The lake was set up, nice thermocline around, 50, 55 feet. And the rods were moving, starting to get some real nice kings. We've got a couple of big derbies, and a lot of good fish were caught out of the water that I fish out of the Toronto area or the Bluffers Park area. And then and I think you kind of talked about it. Then what happened was we've had no weather for the most part. The water just kept getting warmer and warmer and warmer, and the next thing you know, if you wanted to find water of, call it 50 degrees or cooler, you were down 90 feet, 100 feet. Like you haven't fished really deep. And then I was starting to hear guys talking about, especially those without a speed and temp system, they no fish, like what's going on? Or people saying like, I went out, I didn't have a good fish. And it's because they were still fishing that upper, call it 70 feet of water.
Mm-hmm.
And it was practically boiling, that water. It was so warm, right? Like, you were in the low 70s, high 60s, pretty much until you got down to like that 75, 80 feet. So that's when my spread really changed. And I then, pulled up the mag divers, and, it's running mag divers out 250, 300 feet, which I do not like doing. Those things are deep, they're heavy, and they suck to reel in. A couple, my shallow rigger would be like, 85 to 100 feet. My deep rigger is down 150. And then, when it came to running long lines or junk lines, for the most part, I wasn't, because the problem is there was so many boats. I couldn't throw out a 400 weighted steel, or like that's the longest I have on my boat is a 400 weighted steel. If I need to go deeper, I just clip on the Torpedo weights. But there was too many boats, so I really couldn't. So a lot of time limited to like a 4-rod spread, and that was really this past weekend. That's what we were dealing with. Now the good news is we were getting fish. The bad news was we were only having 4 rods out, which meant we were not really able to cover as much water as we'd like to. But then again, we really didn't need to because it was concentrated. So that was kind of what was going on. The one interesting piece, and if I was on my boat, which I'm not right now, I'd show you guys, but anyone that fishes really deep, like, 100, 125, 150, even deeper, knows that your landing ratio like that is really slim, because when the fish hits, A, it might not pop the clip. If it does, like you got so much slack in the line from the bow, you can lose fish. So not to make this a commercial, but I think it's important to share. I've actually now rigged up a couple of rods on my boat where I've done a video on my YouTube channel on this, where I've actually got 19 strand Torpedo wire on the rods. And then I put about a 30, 40 foot lead of 40-pound monofilament. And it's like, I call it direct drive. Like that rod, when it goes into the water, it's got the exact same angle as the downrigger cable. Granted, you have to crank. I use Black's releases. I got those Black's releases cranked up really tight so they don't pop. But that's something I was doing. But then, to your point, then we got some wind, and we had that. And so if I think about, and I'm just going from memory now, Monday, I was meant to have an afternoon trip, and I looked at the weather and saw there's going to be some really heavy southwest. And so I ended up calling the guys and moving it to Saturday to Monday morning, and we did quite well Monday morning. Monday afternoon, it blew like crazy. Tuesday morning, it blew like crazy, and I had to cancel my charter on Tuesday morning. Tuesday afternoon, it was still a little bumpy when I went out, but it really laid down and flattened out. But what it did was, to your point, it didn't flip the lake. It just made it better. So what happened is it brought the water up. So what happened is we started getting that nice thermocline around 40, 45 feet of water. I was using my Smart Troll 2 device. So I had a temperature probe in my high rigger and a temperature probe in my low rigger. I was seeing, down 88 feet. I was seeing 43 and a half. So I was actually covering a lot of water. And I was able to start running more rods. The crazy part was I couldn't get the rods in the water. The fish were so happy to play. Mm-hmm. So ended up only being out for 4 hours because we shortened the trip a little bit because it was a bit bumpy. I was out for 4 hours running a 5-rod spread, 2 riggers, one around 40 feet, one around 88 or 99 feet, depending on the time. A couple of divers. One was both on 3 settings. Sorry, setback. One was setback 133. One was setback 188. And I was running a 7 color down the chute. And in 4 hours, we had 17 bites. It was absolutely incredible. And that leads up, though, to something I want to talk about. And my theory on why it was so good was, A, there'd be no fishing pressure for 24 hours. B, the water had changed. I think it brought fish in and brought the bait and the nice temperatures up higher and brought a nice thermocline. But C, it was the start of the full moon. It was the start of the full moon phase, which is probably the moon phase I hate the most. I can't stand a full moon. I've got people right now messaging me saying, am I out tonight? How was fishing yesterday? And I'm not out because I actually look at the moon phases and I choose not to be on the water around a full moon purposefully.
Yep.
And why I bring that up is it was right before the full moon, and the fish were chomping. But then, my theory, and I'd love your thoughts on this. And I know we were talking a little bit earlier. Once you get that full moon or close to the full moon, and a few days afterwards, I find the bite just dies. I feel like the moon is so bright, it's so light out, especially when there's a lot of bait around. The fish can just gorge themselves all night long. And unless you get out there really, really early, like literally in the dark, to catch that really tight window bite, the fishing sucks. So I'm sitting at home tonight just kind of relaxing, and I've got all kinds of people sending me messages, asking me how the fishing is, how am I doing? And it's because everyone's struggling. And people are telling me they're struggling. I've got friends and family out there right now, and there's not much going on. And I'm like, yeah, well, it's a full moon. So I'd love your thoughts on that, Brandon, but I can't stand a full moon, and I do everything possible not to fish it.
Yeah. I have a question for you as a rebuttal, if that's the right word. But yeah, you kind of touched on it pretty much. We get out there as early as possible. We know that first couple hours is going to be your best chance of getting fish. And then it's going to be it's going to be real tough, and then, I fished Lake Erie yesterday, and it was a really slow bite to start off, and it didn't start to pick up until like 10, which doesn't surprise me because those fish are going to feed at weird. Yeah, they're going to feed at weird hours. And then, I was able to put a good pattern together with that. So my question for you is, what is that when you mark that full moon, how many days before and after do you feel like are the days that aren't great?
Yeah, so if I use this one for example, Wednesday was the full moon, so yesterday. I fished Tuesday. Originally, I was only planning to fish Tuesday morning, but I ended up having to flip it to Tuesday evening, and it was amazing. So I find just before, as the moon's coming up, I find it's quite good, and you can usually actually extend your bite. Like my trip was done at 8:30, and I don't like coming. The marina I'm out of, it's not well lit at night. Is the entranceway. You got one little red light at the point. None of the markers are lit. Right now they're doing dredging, and they've got these temporary, they're almost like antifreeze containers tied to rope. You drive over one of those, going to your prop. So I don't like going in the dark. But my personal belief is, but that night before the full moon, or right when it's coming up there and it's that big moon, you could probably fish 2 hours into the dark and still get a lot of bites. From there, like I wait. So I'm not out with customers again until Saturday morning. So, I'm giving it all of Wednesday, all of Thursday, all of Friday before I'm going back out with customers. I am going out with my wife, my brother-in-law, sister-in-law, and my two nieces on Friday evening for a few hours. I want to try out some new patterns and stuff that I've been painting up for my Project Salmon brand. But I personally feel like it's, you got to give it like 3 days. It's, there's a spotlight in the sky, and I feel like their whole, their metabolism, their cycle, whatever you want to call it, their feeding pattern is out to lunch. And it's funny, as I'm talking to people right now, I was talking to one gentleman over Facebook Messenger, and I brought this up. He goes, man, I never thought about this. He goes, I'm a hunter. And he goes, I know the exact same thing for hunting. He says, when it's full moon, it's a midday bite. Sorry, a midday hunt typically is when we get them. So my personal belief, like when I was more recreational fishing, when a full moon would happen, we just go later or stay out later and get that midday bite. Now that I'm running mainly charters, I just take the day. I take the days off to recharge my batteries.
Yeah, why beat yourself up to is one of those things where it's like you could just absolutely beat yourself up for a bite that's probably not going to happen. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things where it doesn't matter what you put out there. That's not the main reason you're not getting bit.
I was on the water for 14, 15 days straight. I could do with a few days off the water.
Exactly. Yep.
But yeah, so you talked about your so your walleye bite. Have you heard anything about were guys struggling on the South Shore for salmon the last few days as well?
Well, it hasn't been too bad. We've still been getting them. But to your point, actually, and I was going to bring this up and then I forgot. The fish that were caught this morning, it was a heavy bite early, and then it's like we said, it slowed right down those first couple hours. And every fish that was filleted was just absolutely engorged with bait. Yep. And that just goes, that's exactly it. They're feeding all night. They can see easier. Whether it has, like you said, it has something to do with their cycle. But it's still, we've been getting them, but it's been more of a morning. And prior to that, we've been doing pretty good on them. Like I said, we found out what's best for our direction of troll. And we've just been staying on it, and thankfully, it's kept up with a pretty consistent bite. And like I said, I'm doing a few different bodies of water over just a handful of days here, and I'll be out on Ontario on Sunday. So hopefully that moon will not be affecting me. I'll be in an inland lake tomorrow. Yesterday I was on Erie, like I said, and one thing that that happened to me yesterday that I just want to quickly touch on. I wrote up a little post on this on some of the walleye forums that I'm part of, but this is my salmon mind taking over. I'm just using it for walleye. But the bite was slow, and I was just having trouble finding active fish, and especially for walleye, with people thinking they always have to troll slow for them. I do this in salmon fishing. If I'm struggling, I can't find fish. My goal is to put all baits on that are not speed dependent, meaning they can handle fast speeds.
Yeah.
And my goal is just to cover water until I find fish and then put a pattern together. And that's what I do when I'm struggling on Lake Ontario. And that's what I did yesterday. I had fish on the graph, but they just weren't biting. And this goes against what a lot of people do for walleyes. But I took off all my live bait. I took all my stuff that has a speed limitation to how fast it can be trolled. And I put a full hard bait program out, and I put a full spoon program out. Not a single piece of live bait. And I cranked up the speed to 2.5, which is super fast for walleyes. Yep. And I just covered ground, and I covered ground, and I was going after those active fish. And whether it's salmon or trout species, or whether it doesn't matter what the species, in this situation, you're looking for active fish. And, that's something I can tell anybody. Cover ground. You know what I mean? If you're walleye wise, if you're going 1.8 miles an hour, 1.6, you are not going to cover a lot of ground, dragging bottom or whatnot. The active fish will chase, and that's something that I did. And it works for both Great Lakes and both species. But the key is you got to have the type of baits that you can use and understand, what can be trolled fast and what can't be trolled fast. Because like a worm harness will burn out, and it's like that with other baits too. Some baits cannot be trolled fast, and they will burn out. And I think people don't realize that that's what causes their bait. Especially worm harnesses. They come back in like a big bunch, and you're like, how the heck did this happen? It's because you were going too fast. It couldn't handle the speed that you were trolling at. So putting baits on there that can handle that speed is key. Yeah,
no, it's a good point. I do similar when I'm salmon fishing. I'll go to a spoon and fly program.
Yeah.
Spoon and flies, and I speed it up. But it's interesting. As you say that, I'd say the last few trips I was out, and again, I've not been out in a couple of days. They would take in anything I put down there. I could put meat rigs out, I could put flies out, I could put spoons out. As long as, for me, the color, as long as it had green, chartreuse, or black in it, as long as those three colors, I was taking fish. And I started out with some herring strips, and when the fish were really chowing down, I've started putting an artificial strip by a company called Bite My Herring up here in Ontario. That started to be on my deep rigger. It's a glow one with black dots. It just smashed fish, and then after I started taking more and more fish, I just put a green one with black dots on one of my divers, and it was taking fish, because at that point I'm like, I have confidence in those baits, and I'm like, why keep putting herring strips out when I don't need to?
Yeah, exactly. Yep, agreed.
Doesn't make sense. So Brandon, I think we're right around 30 minutes. Anything else you'd share with folks before I ask them the question of the day?
No, just one thing. If you haven't already liked and shared, make sure you do. Congratulations to Bob Hunter. He won the Spin the Wheel contest to get into the Spin the Wheel. You need to like and share the video to get entered into next week. So congratulations to him. Make sure you do that right now. He'll win the same prize as the winner of the Q&A that Marc's about to go over. So I'll let you take it from here.
Awesome. So there's only so I think this would be great. You know, I think a lot of guys are fishing, so it might be a smaller group actually watching us live today. So maybe a better chance to win. But the question I'm going to ask you today is, what is the moon phase that I hate the most? I think that's probably a pretty easy question. Hopefully someone gets it pretty quickly. But what is the moon phase that I hate the most? If you got the answer, please type it in the comments right now. And you'll win and Larry. Tony got it. Tony got it first, and he said the full moon. Right at 8:31. He was the first name to pop up. You know, so Tony, you are our winner. I can't stand the full moon. One tip I would tell you guys is, especially if you've got limited vacation days or something, when you think about planning your vacation, go to Google and type in full moon. Either Ontario, full moon, New York State, get the dates, get the days of when the full moon's going to be. And I block them off my calendar. And to your point, Brandon, kind of like that day before and like the 3 days after, I don't plan to be on the water unless I really, really have to, or it's like an extra thing for myself. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, with that, folks, 8:31. Brandon, thanks again for joining me this evening, and good luck when you get back out there on Lake Ontario on Sunday. And to everyone else, big thank you from myself, and good luck on the water. I hope you guys find those fish. Awesome. Talk to everyone later. Bye, folks.
Bye.